morning's reading is from Mark chapter 6. He left that place and came to his hometown, and his disciples followed him. On the Sabbath, he began to teach in the synagogue, and many who heard him were astounded. They said, "Where did this man get all this? What is this wisdom that has been given to him? What deeds of power are being done by his hands? Is not this the carpenter, the son of Mary and brother of James and Joses, and Judas and Simon? And are not his sisters here with us?" And they took offense at him. Then Jesus said to them, "Prophets are not without honor, except in their hometown, and among their own kin, and in their own house." And he could do no deed of power there, except that he laid his hands on a few sick people and cured them. And he was amazed at their unbelief. Then he went out among the villages teaching. He called the 12 and began to send them out 2 by 2, and gave them authority over the unclean spirits. He ordered them to take nothing for their journey except a staff, no bread, no bag, no money in their belts, but to wear sandals and not to put on 2 tunics. He said to them, "Wherever you enter a house, stay there until you leave the place. If any place will not welcome you and they refuse to hear you, as you leave, shake off the dust that is on your feet as a testimony against them." So they went out and proclaimed that all should repent. They cast out many demons and anointed with oil many who were sick and cured them.
Thank you, Cindy. You know, sometimes there's just nothing you can do. It's time, Jesus says. It's time, he says to his closest followers. You have been with me for a while now. You have heard the teachings and seen the healings and experienced the presence and power of God in and through me for a while now. But now, it's your time. It's time for you to go out on my behalf and share those teachings and offer those healings and embody that same presence and power of God that is in and through me for the sake of others. But Jesus doesn't just tell them that, give them that assignment, and then just open the door and kick them out, out you go. Doesn't finish telling them what they're supposed to do and then say, "Oh, by the way, don't let the door hit you in the butt on the way out." No. Like all outstanding rabbis, rabbi, a Hebrew word that just means teacher. Like all outstanding teachers and coaches and leaders, Jesus does not send them out without first giving them a set of final instructions. A set of final instructions, 4 in this case. 4 final instructions that are meant to help them stay focused on what matters most and to carry out the task that he has given them most effectively for the sake of as many people as they can reach. In the second of the 2 scenes from Mark's Gospel that Cindy just shared with us, the writer of Mark's Gospel tells us that Jesus gathered the 12 and then sent them out 2 by 2. And there is the first of those 4 final instructions. Don't go it alone. Don't go it alone. Jesus tells the disciples and us, don't go out on the spiritual journey to do the things I have called you to do alone. Don't try to go it alone for two reasons. First is that having others with you will help magnify, multiply the effects of what you are trying to do. See, the spiritual journey, despite what some in Christianity insist, has never been meant to be a solo endeavor. The biblical literature is clear. The Christian spiritual journey has always been meant to be both an individual and a community endeavor. Yes, we go out on the journey individually in the sense that each of us is different. Each of us is open to and more able to receive the Spirit of God in different ways because we are different people. We are wired differently and we have different life experiences. But at the same time, the Christian spiritual journey is always meant to be done in community with others. Again, because it multiplies the effects of the journey for all, but also, and maybe more importantly, it is a safeguard against what in my mind is the most dangerous of all spiritual traps: spiritual arrogance, hubris. Believing, convincing ourselves that we are and should be our own sole, moral, ethical, and spiritual authority. Then comes final instruction number 2. Don't take anything with you but a walking stick. That's it. Just take a walking stick. Well, yeah. We need to take the walking stick because the spiritual journey is a long one. It's a lifelong one. And that walking stick is meant to symbolize the things that we need to have with us on that lifelong spiritual journey. That symbolizes the teachings of Jesus and the scripture and prayer and all of those things that help us along the way. Take that, Jesus says, and leave the other stuff behind. Leave the extra stuff, the stuff you don't need, the obsession with wealth and power and prestige and popularity and all those things that only serve to distract you from what matters most. Then comes final instruction number 3. Be willing to receive and be grateful for hospitality. Be with others who welcome you. Because there may be no greater act in our spiritual tradition than the giving and receiving of hospitality, of honest, genuine, fully inclusive welcome. But then comes that fourth and final instruction. Jesus says, but on the other hand, if someone doesn't welcome you, if they don't want to listen to you, if they don't want to be open to receive you, if they don't want to be in relationship with you, shake the dust off your feet as a testimony against them. Shake the dust off your feet as a testimony against them. Oof. That sounds a little harsh. Doesn't sound like Jesus, does it? Sounds rather condemning. Sounds like that another example of that character in the Gospels that I like to refer to as not so nice Jesus, as a testimony against them. But even that first part, shake the dust off your feet, doesn't sound quite so Jesus-y either to me in a way. I mean, no, just keep trying. Keep trying to connect and have that relationship and get them to listen to you and all of that. Just keep trying, keep at it. Don't ever give up. None of that. Just shake the dust off your feet. Just doesn't seem like a piece of advice that Jesus would give us, but maybe it is. And maybe it's as if not the most vital of those 4 final instructions. And maybe the most personal for Jesus. The one that he understood the most through his own personal experience. See, in the first scene, the first of those 2 scenes from Mark's gospel that we're sharing this morning, Jesus has been out there. He has been out there offering those teachings and providing those healings and embodying the presence and power of God throughout the whole region of Galilee. And then he goes home. The hometown boy making good returns to Nazareth. And the hometown boy making good is asked to speak, to teach in the local synagogue. And as he does, we are told that the people of Nazareth are astounded. Other translations say amazed. Sounds great. But maybe not. Because other translations and the Greek that the Gospels are originally written in suggest that maybe that astounded and amazed aren't so great after all. Because other translations of that verse say that the people were tripped up by, were offended by Jesus, even were repulsed by him. Which then means that those words we see as astounded and amazed are less a reflection of admiration than they are a reflection of cynicism. And the stuff that the people say in the synagogue certainly seems to support that. As Jesus is teaching, somebody calls out, "Hey, isn't that the kid that used to run around the neighborhood throwing rocks at the squirrels?" Somebody else then pipes up, "Yeah, and don't his brothers and his sisters still live in the neighborhood?" And then somebody in the back calls out, "Yeah, and isn't he just a carpenter, a tradesman?" And then lastly, someone says, "Yeah, that's just Mary's kid." And while that might seem the most innocuous of all of those comments, it's really the least. Because see, the norm in that time and place would have been to refer to Jesus as his father's son, the father that they knew to be Jesus's, Joseph. To refer to him as Mary's son would have been denigrating. It would have been a reflection of, as Jesus will then say, being dishonored. It's a reflection of dishonor, dismissal, rejection. And because of that dishonor, dismissal, rejection, which, by the way, is intentional on Mark's part, because what the writer of Mark's gospel is intending to do here is to put Jesus next in the long line of biblical prophets who were also dishonored and dismissed and rejected by their people. And because of that dishonor and dismissal and rejection, the power of God in and through Jesus is limited. It is limited among those people in Jesus' hometown. Not limited because the power of God is limited, but limited because Jesus, and just like the God he embodies, refuses to violate our free will. our freedom to choose whether or not we will open ourselves up to that Spirit and that presence and power. Open ourselves up to receive it and use it and let it use us. And because Jesus, like the God he embodies, will not, refuses to violate our free will, the power of God in and through him is limited in Nazareth, and there is nothing he can do about it. Nothing he can do about it. Which means the only thing left for him to do, the thing that he needs to do in that moment, in those circumstances, is to shake the dust off his feet and move on. And he does. You see, this scene in Mark's gospel, just like this scene in Matthew and Luke's gospel, they all have a version of this scene. In each of those gospels, this will be the last time Jesus sets foot in Nazareth. He shakes the dust off his feet and moves on because he knows that sometimes there's just nothing you can do. And it's okay. It's okay. Shake the dust off your feet, he tells the disciples and tells us, because sometimes there's just nothing you can do, and it's okay. And surprisingly, the disciples seem pretty good with that advice. There's no indication that they debate it with him, that they resist it, that they object to it in any way. They seem fine with that final instruction. And I say surprisingly, because in our time and place, in our society, in our culture, that's a tough sell. That can be a really tough sell. Because let's face it, we live in a shoulda, coulda culture. A shoulda, coulda culture. A shoulda, coulda society. A culture, a society where we often, so often, insist that there's always something you can do. That everything can be fixed. That if something goes wrong, if a relationship goes awry or becomes fractured, you shoulda, coulda been able to fix it. If that happens, it's because you didn't work hard enough, or they didn't work hard enough. Because somebody didn't try hard enough. Because somebody didn't keep at it, keep going. Because somebody didn't try to do something different that they shoulda, coulda thought to do. And if you're not sure we live in that kind of culture, that kind of society, just listen to 5 minutes of any news or sports opinion show. But what I can tell you, speaking of sports opinions, there may be no more valuable lesson that I ever learned from 20 years spent making a living coaching than the reality that sometimes there's just nothing you can do. That not everything can be fixed. That sometimes you can be as prepared as possible. That you can practice as hard and as well as possible. That you can have as good a game plan as possible. And you still lose. You don't succeed. You fall short. Because the other athlete, the other team or opponent is simply better than you are. They're more talented than you are. Or some wayward bounce of the ball or unjust, undeserved call from a referee sinks you. And there's nothing you can do. And so you got to choose. You got to make a choice. You can either dwell on it, let it eat at you, constantly say coulda, shoulda, or you can take what's good from it, learn from it, shake the dust off your feet, and move on. The two best games I ever had a team play in 20 years, we lost both. Because we played better than we ever had against a superior opponent. And nearly won both times. But we didn't. But I've never had teams play better. You shake the dust off your feet and you move on. And that is why I keep this medal. I keep this medal of a reminder of that lesson, that final instruction of Jesus. Funny thing, though, is this medal's got absolutely nothing to do with athletics. I didn't get it for anything related to athletics. It looks like an Olympic medal, but I certainly didn't get it for the Olympics. I mean, does this look like an Olympic athlete to you? Unless they decide to make being able to babble for 20 minutes or so on a Sunday morning an Olympic sport, I am never going to come near an Olympic medal. Okay? But I keep this medal. The last 3 weeks ago, at the last Ask the Minister session, I was asked about the medal I wear around my neck during communion. I explained that it belonged to my late mother. It was given to her when she was authorized to be what's called in the Catholic Church a Eucharistic minister, someone who is authorized to distribute communion at Catholic Mass. Well, that medal hangs on a nail just inside the door to my office, along with this medal. And I was given this medal. I'm just going to actually put it on. I was given this medal several years ago at a previous church that I served. I was given it by a woman who we will call Sandy and her son who we will call Russell. They first came to our church because Russell was on the autism spectrum. And Sandy was looking for a place that would provide welcome and hospitality to him and to her. And I think we did a pretty good job, our staff, and the members of our congregation, because Sandy and Russell became members and then became, consistently involved in what we were doing, all of our church activities. About 3 years in, Sandy and Russell presented me with this medal. And it just said on the back, "Thanks for helping, Russell." So, I'm sure you understand, I cherish that medal. It was a sign to me of having done something right, of success, of achievement, of accomplishment. But now I keep it for a far different reason. You see, about a year later, Sandy lost her job, and she looked to me and the congregation to help her find another one. And we tried. We really tried. I tried, the people in the congregation tried, even though I certainly, and many of them, had absolutely no knowledge or connections in her chosen field. But we tried. Months and months and months and months. But then after about a year went by, and Sandy had still not secured a new position, she and Russell stopped coming around. Stopped coming on Sunday, stopped being involved in any of our activities. And I and our congregation tried to reach out. For months and months and months, I tried. I really did. I tried through every avenue I could think of, email, phone call, text, through other people that Sandy knew. Nothing. Nothing. I was, as the kids now say, being ghosted. And then I learned not long after that from someone else that Sandy and Russell stopped coming, stopped being involved, and were ghosting me because she was angry that I had not done enough to help her find a new job. And I understood, but it hurt. And I'll be honest with you, it hurt. I'm sure it didn't hurt anywhere near as much as the hurt that Jesus felt being rejected by his hometown. But it hurt. But what bothered me even more was having to admit and accept the fact that there was nothing I could do about it. That I had tried, I really had tried, we had tried everything we could think of, and there was nothing I could do about it. That drove me crazy, like I'm sure it probably drives you crazy in situations where you feel you've done everything you could and there's no solution to be found. The thing involved can't be fixed. So again, I was left with a choice. Either continue to dwell on it, beat myself up over it, be angry at myself about it, or shake the dust off my feet and move on. Move on for the sake of my own spiritual journey and for the sake of the spiritual journey of the rest of the congregation that God had put me in place to watch over. And if you're wondering what prompted all of this today, it's the fact that just in the last few days I have had two people I know describe similar situations. Describe the frustration and the hurt and the disappointment that they are experiencing because they have tried and tried and tried to reconcile with someone important to them, and it's just not happening. Because sometimes there's just nothing you can do except shake the dust off your feet and move on. That's what I told them. Because that's what Jesus tells us. Shake the dust off your feet as a testimony against them, but not that last part in a condemning way. Not as an act of condemnation, but in the sense that the linguist and gospel translator Sarah Rudin understands that verse in this scene. Rudin understands from the Greek, the original Greek that it's written in, that what Jesus is saying is more along the lines of, do not let unmerited, undeserved hostility and anger cling to you. But instead, let it be a testament, as in, understand that instead it speaks to an issue that the other person has. An issue that you can't fix. And so when that happens, shake the dust off your feet and move on for the sake of your own spiritual journey. Shake the dust off your feet and move on. And then just leave the rest in God's hands. Shake the dust off your feet, Jesus says. It's okay. Because it is okay. Amen.